This is a very interesting one in that it's dated February 8th of 23, but it has 22 features.
And that label's pristine.
Because the mandolin boom basically died abruptly at about 1922, which just coincides with the introduction of the F-5.
Yeah.
And they thought maybe the F-5, sales are down, let's make the ultimate mandolin. Also, the mandolin probably was already in the design phases before they realized that the mandolin market had just crashed and wasn't going to come back. The F-5 was too late for the classical mandolin boom and much too early for bluegrass.
Do you think it is something particular about the July 9 batch of the Lloyd Loar signed mandolins, or is it because Monroe had a July 9 mandolin that makes him such a legendary instrument?
Well, everybody wants to be like Bill, in a way, and that's the pinnacle moment. These are the Mona Lisas. These are the original Van Goghs and things. This is what every builder strives to do. It's the Stradivari of the mandolin, and they advertised them as that in 1922. So it's pretty crazy to actually, they kind of predicted it, but it's actually the Stradivari of the mandolin because of bluegrass music, not classical music, and that was what their intent was. So I've studied Loar's records. I've got a bunch of memorabilia from his era, and just to hear what he had to say, and he might not have touched every one of these mandolins, but well, he had to because he had to put a label in them. But as far as the construction goes, he depended on his team, and he had a vision, and it came to fruition, and it ended up kind of being a flop.
Yeah.
So
he ended up there about 3 years and then moved on.
And then all of a sudden, here we go. They're when Bill Monroe gets his hand into one, and I remember talking to some guys that were around in the '60s, and they'd say, "Bill, what kind of mandolin you got?" And it's just a Gibson mandolin. Didn't know nothing about Lloyd Loar, and when people started looking in there and seeing that Lloyd Loar name, that's when it started popping. I said, well, I need to find me a Lloyd Loar signed instrument, and that's when things started a craze. Jim Orchards, he just passed away this year, and he had a February 8th, 23, and he remembers visiting Bill. The first time he ever met Bill in person, he had that mandolin, and they were in a jam session at Bean Blossom, and a guy came up and he said, "Is that what I think it is?" And he said, "I don't know what you think it is." He said, "Well, it's a Lloyd Loar, right?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, and he said he pulled out a roll of cash, and he said, "I'll give you $10,000 for it right now." And that was in 1971. So I think, like I said earlier, everybody wanted to be Monroe because that was their hero. And so when you look at the date, I think there is a provenance and a sound unique to the July 9, 23 batch. I don't know if it's the best, or I think it's all a matter of opinion because everybody's got different ears and they all play a little different and they all sound a little different. Ricky's neck is a little bit bigger than this one. They're all to each their own mandolin.
Yeah.
But I think there is specific things, this wood on the back, the rift cut. There's a lot of different things that happened in the July 9, 23 batch, and I think they are special. I also think that there are other batches that are very special.
Yeah. And it could be a combination of all that. It could be something special in it, and we're going to give a little extra because Monroe, this was his mandolin, that dated that date. It was the F-5.
I think the value of the July 9s and especially the sidebounds are a little elevated because of the Monroe provenance, but they're all special, they're all unique, they all have their own they're all consistent in ways, but they're also very unique. And Bobby Osborne told me one time, he said, it don't matter what them labels say, it don't matter what's up on the peg head. He said, it matters what comes out of these here holes.
Yeah.
And so it's all in what you put in them too. I had a conversation this morning about Monroe's mandolin in particular, and they said, I think that one's probably said to be the best because that was the most heard, and that's what everyone compared everything to.
How many million hours were probably played through
exactly?
it?
How many shows? How many states? How many countries?
Back
we can
of the
say
bus
that.
Practicing.
Yeah, riding in a station wagon, and Dell talked about Monroe wouldn't even put it in a case when it was in the station wagon. He'd just have it behind the seat, and he'd say, "Dale, grab me that mandolin," and he'd just grab the neck and put it in the front. So the stories and everything, I think, applies to each individual mandolin, making it what it is.
Don't forget me, little darling.
At that time, there was no other mandolin by any other maker that could do the sounds that an F-5 could do. When Monroe got his F-5 Loar, he is the first one who discovered these new sounds that you could do on an F-5 that nobody had ever done before. Chopped chords to drive a 5-piece band with mandolin setting the rhythm. That's unheard of. He discovered these tones that an F-5 could do that were not even tones that designers themselves had in mind. There was no use for that type sounding classical. He could have tried it on an F7, but it wouldn't work. There wasn't any other mandolin that would have inspired him to do that. His style of playing changed radically after he got the F-5. The guitar was somewhat interchangeable. The banjo was to a large extent interchangeable. I even asked Earl, why did you play Gibsons? And I asked him, aren't you familiar with Vegas and Bacon's or Epiphone banjos, any of these others? And she said, he didn't know anything about them. The only people he knew around there, that area in Carolina, they had Gibsons, and the dealer had Gibsons, and the people that's what he'd heard. He could have sounded just like Earl on another banjo. The guitar didn't have to be a D28 to play bluegrass, but to play mandolin and bluegrass, it had to be an F-5. And I would go as far as to say that had it not been for the F-5, bluegrass might never have evolved.
Shine on the one that's gone and left me blue. It was on a moonlit night, the stars were shining bright, when he whispered from on high, your love has said goodbye. and on the one that's gone and said goodbye.
Very nice. What kind of influence did Monroe have on you directly, or just in general to the music that you followed indirectly?
Well, he was synonymous with the Grand Ole Opry, and I'm sure that's where we heard him first. I mean, and how happy birthday to you, happy birthday to Bill Monroe's mandolin. So, and what a wonderful replica of that. It's beautiful. My family listened to the Grand Ole Opry before I was ever born, so it was a part of our life, of everything that we did. We always listened when it was on, and sing Bill Monroe. And I mean, I'm just thinking too, how many times that Bill Monroe's, that mandolin was in this very room at the Opry. So very special to get to think about 100 years has gone by, and that mandolin's still here, and you know how many times it was here.
You may not have known, but the father of bluegrass music, Bill Monroe, he created bluegrass music, the music that we love and that we travel all over the world performing. His mandolin was born on July the 9th of 1923. 100 years ago today, his mandolin was born. So it's 100 years, it's 100th birthday. And this is a replica. Thanks to the Acoustic Shoppe in Springfield, Missouri, they are loaning me a replica of that. This is what his mandolin looked like. And so I'm getting to play that tonight. I thought we should do a Bill Monroe song on this mandolin.
I think about how my father had a car wreck when I was 2, so he was very hard for him to get around. He gained his mobility with a cane. And my first time meeting Bill Monroe, I was probably 11 or 12 years old in Knob Noster, Missouri. Bill Monroe was there. I mean, Bill Monroe, Osborne's, Jim and Jesse, Dr. Ralph Stanley, all those people were there. But my dad, and I don't ever remember him doing this ever in my life except for this one time. And he made the trip down it was a very steep hill. It was all gravel. It had to be very treacherous for him. He and I, before Bill Monroe went on, I don't know how he knew he was there, but we walked down behind the stage. Bill Monroe was standing with that very mandolin backstage at Knob Noster, Missouri. And my dad talked to him and he said, I want you to meet, this is my daughter, Rhonda.
Wow.
And he introduced us, and and my dad took that picture. I don't think he took another picture of me ever in my lifetime, but he knew how important it was, the father of bluegrass with his amazing, famous mandolin, and how important that was to him for me to get to meet him. And so
that's really awesome.
I have that picture, and knowing that was my first meeting, and then just to know how special that was to my dad. To make sure
put
that he did
that much effort into it to get down there. That's very telling of it. And then all these years later, which I know we were so proud when it happened, and the timing was terrible right when COVID struck, but you actually getting to become a Grand Ole Opry member, I mean, that's like coming full circle from you growing up listening to the Opry on the radio and kind of imagining what it looks like without seeing it, and then eventually being invited to be an Opry member. That just had to be so special.
That's a dream come true. A dream come true to be an Opry member from Green Top, Missouri, of all places, And to have Darren, my brother, Darren, to have 2 Opry members from Green Top, Missouri.
Most members from the same town in Missouri.
I know, yes. It's so unlikely. So there's a lot of historic moments. And I was invited on February 28th of 2020, waited 343 days. So it's kind of historic in that that's the longest anyone has ever waited to be inducted. I was inducted on February 6th, 2021 by Dirk Bentley.
That had to be a little painful to wait, but...
You know what? I really was at peace with that. I said, I've already been invited.
Yeah.
And whenever...
They can't take it back.
Well, they could have, I guess. But I thought to myself, I never thought this would... I had become at peace that I would never be an Opry member. So when they invited me, and I kept waiting, and they're like, you know what? Maybe we should do this. It's like, I don't, and I think they even may have called and said, do you want us to just do it privately? Or it's like, no, I want to wait till the Opry's open. I waited all this time. And whenever it is, I want it to be really special. My whole family got to be here for that. And so I'm just so thrilled and love every second of being a member of the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're very proud of you, and I couldn't think of somebody more deserving for representing bluegrass music on the Opry.
Thank you.
You know, the July 9s I've played are really the culmination, because you get the earlier mandolins are, you know, they're kind of finding their way, and then all the innovation comes together on July 9, and then you couple that with Bill Monroe. That makes that date very, very special. It immediately changed Bill Monroe's playing. He was playing with his brother Charlie on a F7, a little short neck F7, which he told a friend of mine one time that was a good little singing man.
We were talking to George Gruhn a little bit on this trip, and he and I agree with him that it was kind of the coming together of Bill Monroe and the F5 mandolin that allowed bluegrass music to be created, and all the things that have come since then, all the different genres of music that have been inspired by bluegrass, the banjo playing, all those things that resulted in that really was the coming together of Bill finding that mandolin in a window of a barber shop, and the sound that F5 allowed him to make with that bluegrass chop and that really powerful tone, that cutting lead that would lead a whole band, basically. I know George, he said he didn't believe it could happen with that F7, so it was just really that coming together with that right mandolin.
And it's also, you know, you have to pay tribute to the guys that he had in the band at the time too, because he played that F7 with the first lineup of the Bluegrass Boys and Bluegrass Girls too. Sally Ann Forster was actually playing in that band, playing accordion.
Yeah.
So, you know, you had a lot of, he was experimenting a lot. He was very forward thinking, but all of a sudden he hired a guitar player named Lester Flatt, a young banjo player that nobody had ever heard anything like his style, a 3-finger roll with a drive that was unlike anything in bluegrass music.
On Saturday night when our work is done, we load up music up on the run, heavy traffic ahead, heavy traffic ahead. We got to ramble, heavy traffic ahead.
That perfect storm, if you will, of those guys, Chubby Wise on the fiddle, Jody Rainwater on the bass, Earl Scruggs on the banjo, and Lester Flatt. And then all of a sudden this mandolin, you know, the F5 comes as that missing piece of what that sound was supposed to be like. Bill Monroe immediately started playing a backbeat timing because of Lester's rhythm style, a thumb and finger pick, and then that banjo, so much of a roll on the banjo. It was genius of Bill Monroe to figure out what the role of the mandolin, which would be that backbeat rhythm, like a snare drum,
like a snare drum,
and just keeping it simple, and letting the banjo and the fiddle do a lot of the fills and a lot of the backup, but still the mandolin was very, very present. So it was, you know, that perfect sound of that mandolin and the perfect band.
We got to ramble, let's have it traffic ahead.
Quickly talk about some of the reason that the F5 was so substantial to the movement, to Bill Monroe, to the world of mandolin. Like almost every new mandolin builder out there in the last 50 to 100 years has tried to copy the F5 mandolin, because it is just, so many changes were made to it. I'll let you take that one.
All right.
And I got like my F4 mandolin, which is kind of what was around before Lloyd really moved into Gibson, correct, in the 20s?
That's right. This is a perfect example of...
This is a 1914.
1914 was the top of the line mandolin. The big differences there are pretty noticeable right off. You've got an oval hole, a short neck, which joins at the 12th fret. On the F5, it's a longer maple neck. These are mahogany necks. The F holes, of course. The implementation here of violin technology started by Orville Gibson. So by 1902, there was a transition from Orville style of build that started the transition into mass manufacturing. I believe that Lloyd Loar had influence with the company as early as somewhere around 1904 and 5,
really?
But when he graduated Oberlin as an acoustic engineer, and a degreed acoustic engineer. Lloyd Loar had a vision that he was always trying to improve the sound of the instruments. He also knew from a very educated point of view about the audible and inaudible tones being lined up to make a perfect sounding instrument. So with Orville's initial design, all of those wonderful attributes that the violins and all that technology moving forward was all implemented and came about as an F-5 mandolin by the middle of 1922.
We've talked about this. We're really excited. You started. When did the Hall of Fame Monroe mandolin project begin?
Let's see. We started that project like 5 years ago, I believe now, and basically it came out of a request from a movie company that was working on a biopic about Bill Monroe, and they originally had requested 3 different versions of Bill Monroe's mandolin, which would be the version that the way it looked when he found it in a barbershop and in the window of a barbershop in Miami, Florida, and around 1945, 1946.
So almost like new condition in that.
Basically a 20-year-old mandolin that was in very, very good plus condition. It would have been a 22, 23-year-old mandolin.
The inspiration, obviously, you said with that movie was to have the 3 different stages. So then you had kind of the angry Monroe one, which
the
would
Mad
be
Mun,
the Mad Mun.
that we have. I basically helped Ricky make one of his prototype Skaggs models into the first Mad Mun.
So that was the era when Bill, and I put in the blog that there's numerous stories out there. I heard Sonny Osborne telling a story, I think on the Nashville Network once, that Bill told him that it was because he just didn't want people to keep asking to play his mandolin. But I've also heard that Bill was upset with Gibson because he sent a mandolin back to get some repairs done. It took forever to get it done, and they didn't do half the repairs that he asked for. So out of spite, he just scratched off the Gibson name.
Well, that's a lot of it right there. That's a lot of the story. And the way I heard it, Bill got the mandolin back after months and months that Gibson had it. He had busted the scroll off and it was gone. And I think he was wanting that to be replaced, this peghead scroll, which does break off once in a while still.
I broke one off mine.
And so he sent it back for that. They didn't fix this. They didn't have tuners that fit these tuners, so they sent back a mismatched set of tuners. For the Mando geeks out there, reverse on one side, non-reverse on the other.
That'll mess you up on stage.
Yeah, it was just completely a
I'd be a little mad
mismatched set
too.
of tuners, and still wouldn't stay in tune because the hole spacing was wrong. And then on top of all that, Gibson did what Gibson normally did back then. They freshened up the instrument, and that means they sprayed lacquer on it.
Yeah.
And it came back, and I'm sure it was a little more shiny than Bill liked.
But not as open. So.
And so he pulled out his pocket knife and started pulling that finish off. And the longer he scraped on the finish, from the story I heard, the madder he got. And after scraping on the finish for a while, he just moved up here and just scratched Gibson out.
So it just said the.
So it just said the. And when I was a kid, I would hear guys tell my dad, "Oh, that Bill Monroe plays a the mandolin," or the mandolin. But
It did become the mandolin.
yeah, the long story short about that is that Gibson actually mended fences with Bill Monroe eventually back in the 1970s, and I have a good picture of a fellow that in Kalamazoo that did a bunch of work, very 70s looking with the pork chop sideburns and the 70s polyester clothes, and he's holding Bill Monroe's mandolin, and he restored this scroll, but they didn't mess with the finish. But they got
Put a new
tuners
veneer on it.
Yeah, and where it would stay in tune and it would play. So mended fences with Bill through all that, and
So you allowed them to put Gibson back on the name.
yeah, and the mandolin had another life. So the first iteration would have been the barbershop Mun, then the second would be the Mad Mun, and then the third is the Hall of Fame Mun, and this represents what the mandolin looks like now, and it's a tribute. It's not an exact replica. But it is a tribute.
I think you did an excellent job in that. And that's what takes me to what I want to ask you next is how did you do the research and development on learning how to antique? Walk us through when you got to this final, let's make this Hall of Fame Monroe. The studying you did, like, was it photographs that you studied that made you?
It is, and I got a few handy that are my working photographs, and it's close-ups, and You
So you
see,
can see like the wear right on that.
you see the wear
Scroll.
patterns, and it's a tribute. So there, I can't get the mandolin out of the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, I'd love to be able to do that.
And
but
the wear just looks. You did an excellent job.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. That it's so hard to get some of the really detailed pictures, like of the back. There's Bill Monroe, and I cut his head out of there just so I could see the back better. But it's you can see the wear patterns of the mandolin and all of its different. All the different light, the light is the hard part because you see it in different lights. And needless to say, I've studied these pictures. That's some of the best pictures right there. I believe that those come from Tom Eisenhower. So thanks to Tom out there for, and I searched the internet. I did my research there. Fortunately, we have that tool.
And then this one is particularly special. We had placed one on order a couple years back, right when we became a dealer with Gibson, but because there was such a back order of mandolins, they kept trickling in with us. COVID definitely put a big delay in things.
Yes.
But then all of a sudden 2023 came up, and we still hadn't got this one finished, and we like, man, this is the 100th year of Bill Monroe's July 9, 1923 mandolin. Is there a way that we can push off the completion of this mandolin until that July 9th date, which ends up being now, to get the 100th anniversary mandolin? And we worked with you directly on that, and you were so willing to help us out with that. So this one,
Well, we appreciate your patience.
it became the perfect opportunity where everything came together, that it ended up being right around that July 9th, so you held it off for us to sign it and date it July 9th, 2023, which is the 100th anniversary, which it says right on there, Hall of Fame Monroe, number 8, 100th anniversary, which is just so special. It's something that we're going to just keep in the shop. I don't think we may ever sell this one because it's just
I didn't have a problem
unique.
keeping it around the shop and playing it for a while. So if you want me to take it and play it some more, I will.
Absolutely. No, I'm keeping this. It's going in It's going to go in our vault, our version of our vault, which isn't cool. As cool as the one here.
I know that you fellas, all the guys and gals at the Acoustic Shop there in Springfield, Missouri, that you'll have a lot of folks that want to come in and see it and experience it, and I know that you'll share it, and that's what it's supposed to be. These instruments are meant to be played and shared and appreciated.